Right. So thank you, Yinghua, for a nice introduction. So today I'm going to talk a bit about my research, and as you know, some of you know that my background is in social cultural studies in health and physical activity, and also health and physical education. So in this presentation, I will touch upon some fundamental topics when researching about race or ethnicity, and also recent literatures and seminal work that could help us perhaps think differently when we research with Chinese diaspora's populations. And as researchers, we know asking good questions already give half the answer. So in this presentation, we start by asking, what is diversity work and how can we think about ethnicity or race and Chineseness? Secondly, how invisible or visible is British Chinese research and communities in the UK? And we'll use health and physical cultures as an example from our current project to think more about race or ethnicity. And third of all, I know some of you are doing your research during this pandemic time. So how does it look like in doing research and fieldwork during this time? And I'll show you some of the latest artworks that I've co-created with artists here. And I hope, I know we come from different academic fields or backgrounds, so I hope at least one of these questions will suit your taste. Let me start by sharing with you a story of mine. Somebody once said to me, to be black in a white world is an agony. And then I wonder what it means to be a Chinese female academic in white institutions. I recall an ordinary conversation with a colleague recently. As she said, I saw a movie about a Chinese woman from America returning to China to see her dying grandmother. The collectivist nature of Chinese culture just reminds me that it's you. It is as if a chasm momentarily opened up in my mind, allowing her perception of me seize control of my voice and to speak in my own voice. I have been put back to my proper place, that of a Chinese woman in a white land. There's no denying that this perception being directed at me. On the outside, meanwhile, my white colleague apparently was unaware of the drama taking place inside my head. What does one do in a situation like this, I wonder? Do I stop the conversation and tell her that I'm not from America, I'm also not from China, I don't think collectivism is about nature, and most importantly, I don't have a grandmother who's dying? To confront her reductionist view of me and risking being seen as a disrespectful and offending her, is that what I want? She was after all giving an innocent remark that has not been given much thought about the complexity and nuances of identities and cultural practices. However, I find it difficult to let this problem pass and keep quiet. So I decided to share it here. These kinds of interactions that touch upon racial and ethnic issues are not unfamiliar to me, and by and large visible in society, where the relations between us and them conform to an imagined system that ensured everyone keeps their proper place and where the white racial equilibrium is reinstated. Sorry. When I think about whiteness, I'm less concerned on the racial grouping, but more so as a concept that suggests white privileges, which the others are unable to benefit under equal circumstances, and where social injustices arise. I cannot help but turn inwards and remind myself that I too am privileged. I'm a Hong Kong Chinese Australian, and I was born and raised in Hong Kong in the 1980s. A post-colonial city reverted to the rule into China after 1997. Then I moved to Australia in my late 20s and have lived in Brisbane and Sydney for the past 10 years, and now I'm based in the UK. In this sense, I'm both mobile and migratory, but such movement was neither urgent nor compelling. It was mostly to do with opportunity, interest, connectivity, and not insignificantly with the capacity to return without fear or favor. Although more recently I have ongoing concerns about Hong Kong China's political tension on migration flows, which has involved international attention, or as China would see it, as interference. You may ask, what does it mean to be a Hong Kong Chinese Australian academic in the UK? Growing up in a geographically small yet very multicultural city underpinned by postcolonialism, I have developed a hybrid identity that sits simultaneously comfortably and uncomfortably with two identities and cultures. While attempting to reconcile the differences and in questioning about my positionalities, Du Bois' double consciousness struck a chord in me. I resonate with his double consciousness as a heightened sense of awareness of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others. This is very true from my recent experience in Leeds, the northern part of the UK, where the Chinese communities are geographically dispersed. Though different from Du Bois, I'm not black and I did not grow up in America. I grew up in a middle-class family in Hong Kong. I went to a Catholic girls' school and later received a number of academic credentials in top-ranking universities. Yet, these privileges still do not steer my life away from the two-ness that Du Bois was concerned of as an African American. My two-ness as an academic stems from the fact that on one hand, as a Chinese researcher, I feel that I have a commitment to uplifting my Chinese communities in Anglophone countries in their health-related experiences. And, as a Chinese academic, I need to ensure my English writing work is rigorous and respected within academia, where English is the official language. Being a full-time academic for almost a decade now, I find that as a Chinese researcher who does Chinese diaspora's work in health-related experiences, my work has sometimes been challenged with concerns of that the research focus is being too narrow. Which leaves me to ponder if a person who specializes in, let's say, protein molecular dynamics and plasmid binding protein, by the way, I don't even know what that means, will get these sorts of comments as being too narrow in their research interest. Apart from the two-ness, there's another consciousness to bear in mind, that in being a woman in academia. Let me assure you that I'm anything but shy. Yet, as a Chinese woman working in English-speaking institutions, this is often the remark I received from some of my colleagues and students. My emotional and physical ties with postcolonial nations, Chineseness, and womanhood constitute the triple consciousness in my everyday academic identity. Speaking about identities, we need names. But really, what's in a name? Like all terminologies, for example, the term ethnic minority, can be useful, but it can also be harmful depending on how it is mobilized in different contexts. Not surprisingly, there has been a persistence of confusion, ambiguity, and debates in describing ethnic minority population in usage. The positioning of people into geographical categories or the binaries of either ethnic minority or not ethnic minority group can result in injustices, as people can be forced to choose between the options of British, Australian, or other group, and thus perpetuating the insider or outsider discourse instead of a more contextual and processual understanding of people's experiences. The impact on the binaries of terminologies is that some white minority groups, such as the Irish, Greeks, can often get lost in the ethnic racial discussion. And when the catch-all racial term non-white is used to capture all ethnic minority groups and compared to white, with this can position all ethnic minority population in negative terms and as a residual population, as it sets white as a standard and making the term conclusively ethnocentric. This groupism effect, that is to take discrete and sharply differentiated boundaries of ethnic group, is what make the reification and racialization of people's experiences and practices possible. The point here is therefore not to persist an essentialist difference between the black, white, yellow, or whatever the colors of the skin as a real racial category, but rather as a critical conceptual tool to open spaces for thinking and dialogues. To resolve the binary understanding of racial and ethnic practices, there is a need to capture the gamut of experiences, such as ambivalences, agencies and choices, generational differences, and broader social-cultural factors that construct individuals' practices, which are assembled within specific geographic and local context. And it is also critical to be aware that any labels given and the effects upon people's experiences are contentious and potentially problematic. Nonetheless, terminologies can be useful to increase cultural visibility in the context of normative racial understanding and practices. In taking up a relational and contextual approach to understanding and researching with my participants and to learn more about their experiences, it is inevitable to ask, what kind of diversity work are we talking about here? And this also leads to the question of how able are we meaning, all white, non-white, and every one of us, in bearing with differences in our relations with others. Research with and about race and ethnicity is a broad tent, and we can come from myriad angles in our work. We can draw on different theoretical perspectives, yet the intellectual threads that join our vision in our work, I believe, is ideas that point to the notion of promoting diverse citizens that perhaps might be treated with equality, equity, social justice, and inclusion on the one hand, and to fight hatred, prejudice, and exclusion on the other hand. And it is this splitting that on the other hand list that we often struggle with. In 2020, this is made no clearer than in the global Black Lives Matter protest, a further demonstration of the historical and systematic disenfranchisement of people of color, people other than white. Less discussed but certainly hyper-visible is the racialization and racism against the Chinese amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Building on the concept of melancholia from its Freudian origins and applying it to the social pathology of post-imperialist politics, Gilroy refers to this as post-colonial melancholia, as a residual colonial desire, such as seeing China as a backward other, and that continues to color perceptions of Chineseness. In thinking about how racial others become a threat in our way of life, it cannot be clearer about the paradoxical nature of otherness based on classifying them as either a workaholic who steals our jobs and labor, or a lazy person relying on the state for benefits. In thinking about how we bear with differences, Gilroy's vision was to move beyond the idea of tolerance and to be able to live with otherness without being and becoming anxious, fearful, and violent. And this is where Robin DiAngelo's work on white fragility, especially when she talks about the bearing of psychic burden of race, is useful, to think about our collective struggles in facing our own and others' anxiety, fear, and violence amid the differences between us and them. As mentioned above, the disavowal of others essentially create a dichotomy formed between the racial others and the unracialized white individual. Coming from a critical whiteness perspective, DiAngelo's work on white fragility argued that the white individual has deep investment in race, as the white individual needs the raced others as a backdrop against which they may rise. In exposing this dichotomy that make the hidden fear, envy, and anxiety visible destabilizes their white identity. DiAngelo went on to further explain white fragility is a state when even a minimum of racial stress becomes intolerable, triggering a range of defensive moves. And these almost manic defensive reactions refers to emotions such as anger, fear, and guilt that one is required to act out in order to reinstate the white racial equilibrium in society. And some of these triggers could perhaps help us to reconsider people's practices whenever differences or when the resources that others bring to our field are immediately felt like unbearable interruption rather than assets. And these triggers include when a person of color is in a position of leadership, it could be seen as an attack to white authority. When receiving feedback that one's behavior had a racist impact, it could be seen as a challenge to white liberalism. And all of which may induce anxiety to the privileged white identity and lead to a refusal to bear the psychic burden of race. Now let's shift gear a bit and look at how invisible or visible is British Chinese research or communities in the UK. So I'm currently on a 2-year Mercari Fellowship funded by the EU, and it is a cross-discipline research that aims to understand British Chinese students' health-related experiences. One of the many rationales for conducting this research is that there's a need to enable Europe's increasingly ethnic diverse youth population to lead healthy and active lifestyles, as well as the promotion of social cohesion in its citizens' lifestyles. My research specifically looks at Chinese communities, as Chinese diasporas is the most widely spread diaspora in the world, being the third largest after German and Irish diasporas. It is estimated that there are more than 40 million Chinese residing outside Greater China, about 2 million in Europe, of which 0.9 is in France, 0.7 in the UK, and there's a fast-growing population in Spain recently. When compared to about more than 1 million, that is about 6% of the total population in Australia. The examination of race in the UK and Europe in the current intellectual landscape is often located within a black-white binary debate that often excludes the Chinese from any form of critical analysis. This lack of academic recognition and critical engagement is coupled with the taken for granted, gendered, and racialized British Chineseness in everyday discourses. The ambivalent positions of the hyper-visibility of high-achieving British Chinese students in education and research is in contrast to the invisibility of their everyday health experiences, such as sport, leisure, and physical activity, which I'm interested about. This juxtaposition is reflected through the complexity of how discourses and practices shaped by colonial and racial legacies contribute to a form of Chineseness that remains at risks and overlooked in research about their bodies and physicality. Specifically in health and physical education and sports generally, minority ethnic youths are either underrepresented or represented in public health messages as body as risk, because they do not conform to the Western parameters of physical activity and health regimes. Chinese young people are often seen as fragile, reserved, and disinterested in physical movements. These racialized stereotypes in relation to bodies and physicality provide few alternatives for describing and analyzing Chinese young people in health and physical cultures. And this lack of knowledge has also perpetuated an epistemological hierarchy of understanding of embodiment and how Chinese physicality is discursively and materially represented. And more broadly, when we look at literatures about Chineseness or Chinese diasporas in the UK, an increasing number of research on British Chinese are found in the 2000. If you look at this pie chart, these studies have represented as a panoramic picture of Chinese diasporic communities in the UK in the areas of education, gender, arts, social media, identity, and a historical approach on their economy and transnationalism. Yet, as you can see, Chineseness in health and physical cultures remain hidden and unknown. And with all these reasons pointed out, there's an urgent need to make Chinese diaspora research, Chinese diaspora's research in health-related experiences more visible. So moving on to the third part of the presentation, we'll look at how it feels like to be doing research and fieldwork in a pandemic. And this part of presentation, I think, is a bit more practical, and I think is the most interesting part, without all the theories and, my reflexivity. So let's have a look maybe I'll give you a bit of an overview of what I've been doing so far and some of the analysis or data analysis method I've used. So this project started since last year, January 2019, and since around May time last year, I started my fieldwork in 2 Chinese supplementary schools, and I've been in those 2 schools every Saturday and Sunday to talk to the parents, teachers, and young people. When I talk about Chinese supplementary schools, some of you, who are unfamiliar with this context is, these Chinese young people go to these schools on the weekends to learn about Chinese language, mainly Mandarin and Cantonese, and sometimes they do have drama classes or other kind of physical activity classes for them to participate in. So I have been in these 2 schools for about 10 months before the lockdown, and every weekend I talk to these kids, so I have developed quite a good rapport with them. So collecting all these data, I have done thematic analysis, case study approach analysis, and also narrative analysis to examine them. For thematic analysis, so far, I'm still doing some of the codings. There are 12 topics that have emerged from the data. And as you can see, this box over here, these are some of the topics so far that we have found. And for case study approach, it makes sense to look at families as a unit because these students spent much of their time with the families, especially during the lockdown. And the different family structures has provided us information about the different habits or practices these young people have in their leisure and health-related experiences, and as they intersect with gender and class. And also in doing case study approach using family as the basis of unit of analysis, it does respond to what I've just talked about. We need a more complex understanding of Chineseness. And then we've also been doing narrative analysis, which I'm just trying to understand, all these stories that these students have given me. And alongside, I've been working with artists and creating stories, such as through the work of radio drama scripts and comics, which I'll show you a bit more later on in the following slides. So you may ask, why art-based method? Is it because it's just trendy? Yeah, kind of. But, there's more academic reasons for it, of course. So art-based research has been applied in various disciplines, including health, education, and anthropology. It uses artistic forms and expressions to understand, represent, and explore human experiences. And in this sense, it works really well with my research intention. So this project, one of the research aim is to understand the process of how it feels like and how it looks like when researching with these Chinese young people. And in conducting all these art-based work, it does shows you the process and which could be used to inform future research. So I hope to share my research in creative ways and to connect with as many people as possible. The artwork and resources are created with data collected with participants based on ethnographic, visual, and participatory methods, and the artwork symbolize a relationship and a learning process that is co-constructed between the artists, participants, and myself. Especially during this COVID times, these artworks further provided meanings of solidarity to East Asian artists or artists in general who struggle to find work, and to the participants whom I share cultural identities with. And a bigger ambition of these artwork and resources is to promoting thinking and dialogues that raise consciousness that raise consciousness about emotions and subjectivities, diversity and inclusion, and the need for change in ethnic diversity in health and physical cultures. So this is an overview of, how the drama scripts and recordings are co-constructed and co-created. So since last year, I have started some, discussion with local artists, and I've been, attending some theatre plays here locally in Leeds just to get into the networks and to, know more about their work. And then since March time, I have worked with Mary Cooper, who's an excellent, amazing local artist, writer, and she was happy to work with me in writing up the drama scripts. And since then, she has written 4 drama scripts for the project based on the ethnographic data. And then from April to June, we have ongoing discussion just to talk through the scripts, which part we can improve on, which part doesn't sound too real to me, because I was the person in the field, so I know what happened. And then in July, we've got some scripts ready, and we have set up 2 Zoom meetings with the children participants. We have about 5 or 6 children participants joining the Zoom with Mary together to talk through the scripts, and they've provided really good comments how to improve on it. And one example is there was a scene about playing video games, and I don't play video games at all. And Mary, she's here, and she's about 50, I think, 50-ish, and she doesn't really play video games too. So, and then these children were really good at giving us advice on how to make that scene a bit more real. And then in August time, we started the Zoom recordings of the plays. Because of the COVID lockdown, we couldn't do it in a studio, so we have to do it on Zoom. And we have a team of professional artists, plus we've invited 2 children participants from the project to get on board, and you get to hear, one of the voice later on. I'll show you. And then at the moment it's being translated into Chinese, so it will be bilingual, the script. And later on in October, next month, we're going to do a 3rd play on Zoom again with 2 professional artists. And originally we planned to go back into a studio. We were invited by a local studio called Chapel FM to do the recording there, but because of the COVID lockdown, and in the UK, we've just got 6,000 cases yesterday. So in that sense, well, we need to make some adjustments, and we're going to do a Zoom recording again. So this is the team. As you can see, we look so smart. And these 2 are the children participants, and this is me, obviously. We've got a production manager, Tony. Owen May is the director of the drama play, and this is Mary. Does it look like her? You can tell me. Has written the play for us. And these are, the artists. So I want to show you this play here, which is called Time Off. And the setting is in a Chinese takeaway shop in a northern city in Britain. And the characters involve Charlie and Jay, who are online gaming friends. They're about 12 years old. And then we've got Sunny, who's Charlie's mother, and Lynn, who's Sunny's friend and auntie of Charlie. And it has been translated into Chinese, and the purpose of it is, we want it to be used as teaching resources for university programs who are interested in art-based method or health or sociology of sport. And we also want to use it for Chinese supplementary schools, so that they can, find something more interesting for the students to practice Chinese. So let's listen to it. I'll give you a few minutes of it. The whole play lasts for 10 minutes, but we're not going to listen all of them.
Jay, are you there, bro?
Yeah, been waiting.
So, couldn't get away from one fan. My Yi and Shushu were going on and on about my cousins. They've got a zillion positive comments at their grammar school. He's going to be a concert pianist. She's going to be an Olympic swimmer. They're both going to be...
Santong. Yeah, same, pretty much. I usually get quick on Tuesdays and leave them to chat on Mahjong.
It should be good now, though. My uncle's going to collect perfect cousins from swimming. My dad's in the shop, and everyone else is watching Tang Xing Feng Bao.
Yasso is so ready.
Oh, crap. Wait, my mum's coming.
Charlie, I told you last week, Tuesdays is the only day we eat dinner together. You don't just run away from the table, especially not when Auntie and Uncle are downstairs.
I waited till Uncle had gone.
You could be downstairs with your family or helping Dad stock the shop, but no, you're shut in your room staring at that screen as usual.
I'm doing homework.
It's what you always do. Rush your food so you can get back to your computer.
I've got a maths test tomorrow. I've got to use this new app. You know, I got a detention last week because I hadn't done all my homework.
That's my fault, is it? No, I didn't think so. Finish all your homework from school and Chinese school before...
Okay, I'm only going to show you some of it because you will have to listen it when it's ready. So it is still in the post-production phase, meaning we haven't put in the music and all the whole sound effect, but you get a feel of how it sounds like. And this is the time frame for comics. And again, it started, since the lockdown in May. And what happened is after we've got the scripts from Mary, and then I sent those scripts to Bonnie Pang. Well, yeah, it's exactly the same name, but it's not me. I don't know how to draw comics. So she's an artist, graphic designer in Hong Kong. I really like this part because I can confuse people. So she started to draw these comics for the project. And then again in July and August, we also, sent emails to parents, my supervisors, my advisory board members, and the children participants about the comments on the comics. And they've given us really good comments so that we can improve on the drawing. And then it's being translated into Chinese at the moment. And what I hope is to print those comics in hard copies so that, people in university and schools who could use that as teaching resources, and we'll also put it online as digital comic. And let me just show you examples of it. So this is the first draft, and this is the comment by a girl. So I'll read it out. Have the boy sitting hugging his knees to show the pressure he feels from being pressured to live up to the high standards when he wants to be a normal kid and have fun doing normal things. As shown earlier, his mom doesn't even allow him to join football club, which is controlling and not right at all. Him being told exactly what he can and can't do would make him feel like he has no control over his life, and then his mom is dictating the way he should live. So this is in itself, the comments given back from a participant, is itself a data that we can try to understand, how do they feel about their lives. So this is the first draft, and this is the revised version. So this kid is new, is different now, and then it's clarified some of the background. And then this is the second. This is the second example, and again, this girl talks about make his mom face more frustrated instead of sad, or she'll seem like too much of a victim when she's the one not allowing her son to do some of the things he likes. If she had raised him to be grateful and hardworking, then none of this would be happening. A big problem with parenting is that when we are born, our parents try to give us everything we want and need and more, either thinking that it's best for us or will make us more overall happy people in the future. But in fact, it's counterproductive because it spoils us to the point where we will be upset when they try to take the control that they never put on us, over us. The mom doesn't realize what has caused this, and it should be portrayed in a way that shows that it isn't entirely the boy's fault. So basically, this girl is, really articulate in saying what she thinks, and kind of, quite critical too. So this is how the mum looked like, and then I've given some comments, instead of putting in the boxes, maybe show his father working hard at the background. And taking up all these comments, Bonnie has revised the comic, as you can see. So it's a bit more real in relation to the comments that these participants have provided us. Maybe later on in the discussion I can show you, because as I said, I've just received the latest email from Bonnie. She's put in the color for the comics, so we can have the latest version of it. So in this presentation, I have shared some of my stories, which I think no matter which research field we come from, I think diversity work needs to start within ourselves. And, I've kind of presented in a story format that perhaps some of the points which can enable you to think more about how can we learn more about race and ethnicity in our own research field. I've also outlined the reasons of conducting research with British Chinese young people in their health-related experiences in the UK, which I hope to shift the current intellectual landscape in increasing the visibility of Chinese diaspora's research in health-related experiences here. And last, I also shared the reasons, process, and also have given you a sneak peek of the artwork co-created with artists based on the ethnographic data during the lockdown time. So I think that's all from me at the moment, and I do hope to hear more of your research experiences during this lockdown and discuss what we can do better in our research fields. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bonnie, for a really rich and interesting discussion today. So now we are just opening up the floor for any questions, and please indicate it either by a reaction or just put on chat, say you have a question. Bonnie, so while we are waiting for more questions, okay, Charlie is here. Okay, Charlie, you first. I will do the next one.
Sorry, you could have gone then. I wouldn't have minded. I was just curious. Thank you so much, Bonnie. Firstly, that was amazing and really, really great to hear about what you've been doing. How did you choose the artistic mediums for presenting the research findings?
Yeah, I guess that's both a personal choice and what was available for me to learn in the field. So as I said, I started to get into the field because I'm new to the UK in Leeds. So I started going out, putting out my fillers and trying to understand, what's going on in the art field. So actually, originally, I wanted to do a theatre play, being in a physical space. So I went to watch a play about Chineseness in a way. And then I've talked to the artist, and then perhaps we can have some collaborative opportunities to get working together. But then because of the lockdown, then we've stopped that kind of work going forward. And then it makes sense to, to think about, okay, what else can I do? And coincidentally, I met Mary, we'll have a few email conversation, and then, radio drama play comes to the picture. So that's, naturally, we got into radio drama plays. For comics, I think there's a good academic reason. There have been people using this method in our field to engage children participants, especially because who would read a 5,000 word paper, and then just theoretically dense, of course not a children's. So that's the academic reason for why we're using comics to engage more participants and to get children involved. And also, one of the target participant group of this project is the children participants. So it makes so much sense. I need to produce something that they can use, they could try to understand in their everyday lives. And one of the vision is that these Chinese supplementary schools here will use it as a teaching tool, because what I learned from these children from my fieldwork is many of them don't like going to these Chinese schools. Of course not, who would like to go to school on a weekend? So maybe these comics would be something fun for them to, learn Chinese at the same time, knowing these are their stories instead of reading somebody else. So that's the purpose of, and then the reason why it comes to the comics and the radio scripts.
Great, thank you for that. And I could see that, there looked like some great engagement from the participants in, tweaking the comics and things like that. So it looked really good. They're obviously into it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I will go the next one. So I'm kind of curious because I'm also study Chinese migrants. So the question I have, the struggle I have is that sometimes I found myself too close with them. Like I couldn't distance myself from their experience. And that's something I kind of really want to learn from you. How do you distance yourself from your research? Or how do I say, like, what's your positionality of being an insider and then, but also, write up in a kind of, I don't know, perspective that makes sense to the outsiders? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it comes into, a lot of the field work and reflexivity work. So I guess what comes to mind right away is we're not just insider, we're always an insider and outsider, a passenger and also a driver at the same time. So what it means is sometimes I feel like I know their lives, but there's a lot of instances our identities are not the same. I'm a woman, I'm in my late 30s, I'm from Hong Kong, I've lived in Australia, which is really different from their lives, which many of them are born here, the children. So I think if we look at, intersectionality and all our diverse identities when it entangles, we can sort of understand we're not just an insider. There's a lot of, intricacies and nuances within these identities. And even for the same ethnic group, we talk about co-ethnic, when we talk about racism or race or ethnic diverse analysis, we talk about co-ethnic groups, not just, between black and white. So I think, it's not the way I look at my participants of just being an outsider, because there's so much, complexity in there.
Yeah, thank you. And are we having more questions from the audience?
Hi, my name's Geraldine from Leeds Arts Health and Wellbeing Network. I met Bonnie face to face for the first and last full time in January, and this was before the artwork had started. And at that time, I remember Bonnie having a really full head as she was trying to hold together all the research work and the emerging projects around art. And then obviously since then, all the issues around Black Lives Matter, around lockdown, ongoing, I guess it was maybe a little bit of a reflecting question is, it feels like the ambitions that you had were in January were hard to achieve before we had all these barriers. So has there been a gap between what you had plans to do and where we are at the moment? Have things been lost along the way?
Yeah, that's a good question about what has planned and what has actually been achieved, and because I need to, report it in my project too. You remind me, I have to do that. Well, let's say what has been planned originally, a lot of them has not been achieved, but I would say it's more a matter of going along the way and see what happens, and that's the essence of doing ethnographic research, isn't it? To go along the way and see what happens, what comes up. And I would say not better or worse, but many different things comes up, and many different interesting things that pops up, which enables me to understand these young people's lives better. For example, during the lockdown, I feel like the Chinese communities are more willing to reach out, to talk to me, because I guess it's understandable. People want to be connected, people want to share their life stories, and I was willing to listen. And that gave us a really good platform during the lockdown to talk on the phone, to do Zooms, to get to know more about their lives. And that's also the reason where I get in touch with another girl's family, who allowed their daughter to participate in this radio drama play because of the rapport that we've developed during the lockdown. So I think there's a lot of gains as well as losses too, maybe, but I wouldn't know. So I think I would just say it's different as planned, but I've also, really enjoyed this process. As you can see, we've changed a lot in terms of the format of the art work, but we've also created a lot of, communities and solidarity during this process, which I haven't thought about.
I would like to ask a question. First of all, thank you so much, Bonnie, for presenting in this space for us. And thank you for your presentation. I think it's what I find really inspiring in your work is that you seem to work in so many different disciplines, from art to diversity studies to sports studies, or sports sociology perhaps. And I'm trying to navigate these, so combining the sport studies and diversity studies as well. I'm actually using your work in my PhD. And could you share some of your experiences, what you find challenging in bridging these various disciplines? Thank you.
Yeah, this is a good question, and that actually reminds me of, I'm writing a book at the moment about diversity and inclusion in my field, and there's a chapter about, doing a reflexivity work on why I wrote the book and the process and the journey that I went through. So I guess it's a long story, but I'll try to make it really concise here. I think it's a journey. The short answer to it is a journey, which I think it needs to come from, 10 years or so ago when I started my master research. And I think what I can say is the reason that enables me to come to this point of, trying to synthesize all these different fields and different methods is because I think there's a lot of reflective work, and starting from my master research and going into my PhD, I see the lack in myself. I see the lack of, the first lack that I saw in myself was when I reflect on the epistemological position. Coming from a Hong Kong perspective, I did a lot of post-positivistic research, drawing on surveys, working on people. And then since I moved into my PhD, I got into a space of critical social cultural studies and look at relational, post-structuralist, post-feminist, post-research. And that was a time which I was trying to reconcile that gap within me. I can't accept myself to work on people. I really want to work with people, so I have to reconcile that kind of different ways of looking at things. So that was the first moment that I consciously direct my research in the critical social cultural field, working with people from a relation approach. And I guess the second lack was when I went into Western Sydney University 5-6 years ago, and I felt inapt in teaching students in English. I just feel like I don't have the rapport as good as when I was teaching in Hong Kong, when I can use Chinese and English together. So I felt that lack in myself, and I think that was what prompted me to think more about culture, power, and cultural practices. So because of that lack and that what I need to work on, then I think more about Michael Singh's work on postmonolingualism, epistemic justice, using postmonolingualism to breach the gap, which we can't see at the moment in the field. English is always the main language, but there's so much to draw from a Chinese philosophy perspective or Chinese language. And people have been doing that too. So I'm trying to, use those kind of information inside my current work. And I think the third gap, which is happening now, which I've just presented here in this presentation, is, the psychic burden. We often, neglect that psychic burden of race. There's a lot to bear with, actually, when we talk about racism. It's not just about on paper, writing about how we want diversity, how we want to fight against prejudices. there's a lot to bear with, because there's a relational approach. It's not just about the non-white, but also the white community too. So how can we work together? So this is why I am starting to get more interested into, affect, emotions, and, trying to see how Bourdieu and affect can work together, so I think it starts, so back to your question in the gist is, in seeing the lack in myself and what I want to see out there, what kind of changes I want to see out there.
Yeah, very interesting. So I think my question is coming from this very traditional way of how we structure university in the very disciplines. And if someone is doing interdisciplinary work, we're like, wow. But it's, yeah, so I appreciate your answer coming from your position and coming from, okay, how can we look at an issue and drawing on so many different resources? Thank you.
Thanks.
Heidi, do you want to have the last question?
Well, I think I'm interested in, I really like what you say about reflexivity, and I've tried to do that in my PhD as well, and I got quite a negative response from a senior person to that. So I think my question is, how would you respond to that, and also what has your experience been in I think, yeah, you spoke quite extensively about your experiences, and I think it's immensely helpful, and I think it's immensely important. But yeah, how do you respond to people who say there's no room for that in research? That's not how we do research.
Well, that's a difficult question to give a neat answer. I think because it depends on so much structural factors, isn't it? Which institution you base at, what kind of grants you can get, what are the opportunities out there, are there any people sponsoring you, mentoring you? So I don't think there's a real answer to that, but I think I think it's about, you need to be the person to define your kind of field of work and what you want to do, instead of being defined by others. And because, if you don't define your own work, you would just, people will be moving you around. So I think that's the first step. But I guess reflexivity work is also allowing people to get to know more about what it is. Because when we talk about reflexivity work, people will jump into, conclusion or questions such as, how do you determine the quality then? Or what is, why do we need to do reflexivity work? What is the benefit of it? I think it's, reflexivity work basically is about knowing the intention of the researcher, knowing the intention, knowing the relationship between the research and the researched, and knowing that how legitimate, and more importantly, how legitimate knowledge has been produced. Because knowledge out there is not just objectively, out there. It's always a person who's conducting the research, which a lot of positivistic researchers don't agree with that. So I'm not going to argue and get into that debate, but as ethnographic researchers, sociocultural researchers, we believe the importance of it because we know how legitimate knowledge is co-constructed. And also, if we want to, really work on producing more legitimate knowledge coming from, indigenous populations of the others, then we need to go into this field of work and knowing how knowledge is produced. Because in a lot of, I feel like a lot of us researchers can't be bothered, but without asking how knowledge is produced, you aren't really doing research, I would argue.
Thank you so much, Bonnie, and thank you everyone for attending this session. And so we will make the recording available later, and I would appreciate your comments and feedback on this lecture. And Bonnie, are you going to share with us the comics?
Oh, yes, I'm excited. Okay. Oh, and by the way, Well, if you're interested, I can see some comments. If you're really interested in it, I'm developing some teaching resources, and it will be printed out. Do flick me an email if you want some hard copies. I'll send it to you for free.
Thank you for that. Much appreciated.
All right. Okay, can you see it?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, I'll just show you quickly. So the Chinese hasn't been included yet, but it will. And that's this cover of it. Right.
Wow, amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, so I hope these resources really do help. And thank you for being such good participants, and it's a nice chat with all of you. And I look forward to seeing some of you in person.